Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the juice was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Cross the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, Alaska. Welcome to Oversight Live. I am Ben Carpenter, your host for the evening. Oversight Live is your road to Juneau till one can be built, except for tonight. The meeting was happening in Anchorage, and so you can drive there and witness in person if you so desired. I am looking at the picture-in-picture that's showing the participants, and there were some that were sitting in the chairs watching this particular meeting of the Judiciary and State Affairs Committees as they review candidate questions around candidacy. This is, of course, the brouhaha that erupted when we've got another Dan Sullivan that joined into the race. And I think there's some key points here that we need to keep in mind. Pipeline? There's no committee meetings on pipelines today that I could find. So they must have taken a break. Maybe they need a breather and need to work things out, or maybe they're trying to figure it out behind closed doors. I don't know. Maybe I completely missed it. Turn that down because that's giving some feedback. But I did not see a conference committee meet, which means they're probably still working it out. Because you don't see anything getting worked out in a conference committee. You see the results. All right. So, Oversight Live. I'm here to help you understand what's going on down in Juneau. All right. We're going to watch a committee meeting tonight, as we have most nights. And if you've got questions, we're broadcasting on YouTube, excuse me, YouTube X and Facebook. Chat in your little chat window there will come right to me, and I'll do my best to answer your questions live and on the air. If you want, you can send me an email, and I can, I'll do my best to respond by email. If you've got a good question, then the likelihood is somebody else has got that same question. The only dumb question is one that doesn't get asked. All right. So don't be surprised if we have a conversation about it, because that's the point of this show, is to provide better oversight of our government. And I'm here because we're not doing a very good job sometimes. So let's improve our abilities by asking good questions, getting the right answers, and then we can hold people accountable as needed. All right. That's ultimately what oversight is. The boss provides oversight. Trust but verify, right? That is our role as the owners of the state, as the people of our government. It's instituted, both the state government and the federal government, and instituted by the people, of the people, and for the people. Well, we got to continue to provide really good oversight. So Kevin's making a play on, he's must be feeling a little combative today. The only dumb hearing is one that doesn't get held. Yeah, probably. If it's necessary. I don't know if I can necessarily agree with that, because you and I have sat through some dumb hearings that didn't need to happen. Anyway, I guess that's the we've heard questions that have been asked that didn't need to be asked too. But anyway. Even a dumb question tells you something about the asker of the question, right? The maker of the question. Something can be learned. All right. Let's jump to So this is a kind of a long meeting, a couple hours long, and I don't want to spend all that much time on it. So a couple key things that we're going to jump into. I thought Representative Costello made a really good point. And I think we're going to start there and then move to Mr. Dunmeyer, who's one of the lawyers for the legislature. And he wrote a letter to them, a memo. Somebody probably asked him for his opinion and he gave it. And further discussions at that point. Okay, so let's dive into this. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr.
Volume's
Amadio,
up.
thank you for being here today. We're looking at the situation, and you're here to share with us the Division of Elections role in a vote in a candidate's qualifications. And we're looking at the Constitution and the state law, and I have no issue with that. I think my point and my question has to do with the role of the Division of Elections in whether or not they can investigate the candidate as they appear on the ballot. And I'm here to say they actually do investigate. And the reason I know they do is because they called me. So in the case of a candidate who filed to run for office as Jay McDonald, the division called me and they said, "Do you know Forrest McDonald?" And I said, "No, I do not know a Forrest McDonald." Well, apparently, Forrest J. McDonald is the legal name of the candidate, and they do not go by Forrest. They go by Jay. And so the division was investigating the name of the candidate as it was appearing on the ballot. Now, we all know, and maybe the public knows or not, but you can actually fill out your candidacy form and you can put any name you want. You have that right as a candidate. So in this case, the person wrote down Jay McDonald, and the Division of Elections called around and investigated that with people to make sure that, and this is the important part, that he was not appearing in a manner that was confusing or misleading to voters. Voters know that person is Jay McDonald. They do not know him by another name. And so the division was investigating. And I think that the division has done that in the past, and I think they did it this time. And Mr. Amadio, are you familiar with Administrative Code 25.212?
I don't have it in front of me, no. So if you would,
Okay.
is that the what provision is that? What does that say, Representative?
So this is the administrative code that the division uses to determine whether or not that the individual is appearing on the ballot in a manner that is confusing or misleading to voters, or that compromises the fairness or neutrality of the ballot. They can look at preponderance of evidence, and when they make this determination, they can look at the campaign similarities. They can look at voter registration details. They can look at name similarity. They can look at recent party switches. And so this is not whether or not a person meets qualifications to run. This is clearly a different area, which is contemplated in our regulations, which says that it is not okay to mislead or appear on the ballot in a manner that's confusing or misleading. And so in my, and we do know that this is being contemplated outside of the legislative halls and in the judiciary, but there's evidence there that indicates that, in fact, this candidate, at least as far as the division is concerned, was trying to mislead the voters. And so I just want to put on the official record that as a member of the Alaska public, I was contacted about a candidate, and it had to do with, are they misleading their community? Are they misleading the voters? And it was found that they weren't. And I think, one of the things that we're hearing here is, oh, this has never happened before. Well, it's never happened before because the division has never found that misleading element has been a part of it. The person that you mentioned, Eric Hafner, he met the qualifications. There were individuals who didn't want him on the ballot because it would influence other candidates, but it's very clear what the Constitution says. It's clear what the statute, that what it takes in order to file for office. But once you've done that, the division does have a responsibility to determine whether or not the voters are being misled, whether it has to do with their how long they've lived here, whether it has to do with their name, which is why I was contacted. And I can just say, and this might be an aside, but I have experienced identity theft. And I can tell you that when somebody else is trying to present themselves as you, it is a horrible experience. And I'm not saying that this is a case of identity theft, but I do believe that the Division of Elections, through regulation, it's 25212, has the authority to investigate whether or not a candidate is appearing on the ballot in a confusing or misleading manner. And I appreciate the chair having this committee because we can throw those questions out there. My question has to do with when this is identified that it has happened, would it be the Federal Elections Commission or the Department of Justice that would do further investigation? Because the Division of Elections does not have the tools to, I think, adequately get to the actual bottom of this. But I do think there are ways that the Federal Elections Commission or the Department of Justice can actually do this. And the reason it's so important is that our elections matter. People need to be honest. And I believe that if there's some sort of collaboration going on or an effort in to use the words in the code that you don't want to appear on a ballot that is confusing or misleading. And I think we're all here today because it's confusing and misleading. This is why we're here. We need to get to the bottom of it. And I appreciate the ability to do that. And I hope that this issue is resolved so that anybody who wants to run for office in the state of Alaska can do it, but they cannot do it in a manner that is going to confuse or undermine the importance of elections in our communities, in our state, or in our country.
Thank you, Representative Costello. Just a couple of comments. It's my understanding that part of the confusion with Forrest J. McDonald was that he had previously run for election as Forrest McDonald and then was running in a subsequent election as J. McDonald. So it was running under different names. And then I haven't stated this, but I'll state it now, that there is an Andrew Gray in the Fairbanks area who has run for office there. I just want to state, I don't believe anyone did any identity theft in that case, that there's 11 of us in Alaska. We have that name, and we're all qualified to run for office. Just putting that on the record. We'll go to Representative Story.
Okay, no, we're not. In the first election, my first election, people were very surprised that a newcomer that nobody had ever known, had won an election. Matter of fact, the primary election, I was up against my friend, not so much my friend at the time, but my friend now, who was the borough assembly president, so had some notoriety and had the backing of the local Republican Party. I was this upstart that came in and nobody knew who I was. And I won that primary election by 11 votes. After all of the counting was done, there was 11 vote margin. Matter of fact, I went to bed that night, three votes behind. And as it had been pointed out to me earlier that night, all three of my adult children had not voted in the election. And I will keep bringing this up until the day I die. It is very important that you vote, especially if your dad's running for office. Anyway, the point here is, and I've got a point to this whole story, right? There was a candidate that was serving on the assembly in my district. He was from Seward, and his last name was Carpenter, and his first name was Ken. And on the ballot, my name was Ben. And there was a kind of an undercurrent of, Ben only won because people thought he was Ken. So there was, I didn't even know Ken Carpenter was on the ballot when I filed to run, or not, he wasn't on the ballot, that he was serving in the assembly. I didn't know Ken. I didn't know anything about him. Didn't know I had a cousin. He's not actually related to me, but I didn't know there was Ken Carpenter. Gets pointed out to me later that some people thought Ken was on the ballot and no, Ben was on the ballot. Okay, well, that explained the first election, but it didn't explain the next two elections that I won. So anyway, the point I'm getting up here is, what's in a name? Like, it is important for name recognition and running elections. It is important that people know and can recognize a name. And I think that if in this instance here, where we're talking the technicalities during this committee meeting, okay, and we're gonna get back to that here in a minute, but I just want to put it on my record. Massive mistake. If this was some sort of coordinated effort from the Peltola campaign, massive mistake on her part. Huge. Somebody thought that they were going to pull a quick one. Hey, we'll just tear some voters away from the incumbent, Dan Sullivan, because we'll put a challenger in there with the same name. Okay. Well, you know what? Who everybody's talking about right now, and who everybody will continue to talk about while there's challenges to this whole thing, they'll be talking about Dan Sullivan. And people have to figure out, they'll know that they're going into the ballot, into the booth, and there's going to be two Dan Sullivans there. And now they're going to have to figure out which one's which. The more you talk about it now, the more people are going to be aware. You know who they're not talking about? The candidate that potentially could have some opportunity to win. I mean, if you were looking at FEC filings, let's look at a comparison for seriousness. Okay. This is FEC filings. You probably can't see that. Let me make it a little bigger here. So you've got Dan S. Sullivan, the incumbent, $9 million on hand. Peltola, $8.6 million on hand. Nothing reported for the three others that are running here. That might not be all of it. Anyway, point I am trying, no, it's pages 10. And so that should be all of them. Yeah, that doesn't move. Okay. So point is, if you're actually a legitimate candidate and you're running for federal office, you got to disclose the money that you're making, right? There's nobody besides Peltola and our Dan S. Sullivan who are serious candidates, right? So you can say that you're going to run, but come on, if you're not raising money, then you're not really serious, right? But that's the thing. The federal Constitution doesn't say you have to be a serious candidate to get on the ballot. It just lists some requirements. That's it. Because the framers of the Constitution wanted it to be very broad for maximum participation of people to get involved with their government. Okay. Point made. Back to this. So now we're going to bring forward the star witness, if you will, of the meeting here of the Joint Judiciary and State Affairs, which is this Mr. Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal. We're going to hear his argument. And let me fast forward this to right about there.
It's a question for Division of Elections, but I don't see anything that bars that, that you,
let me back that up.
You have to declare it on your declaration of candidacy. And if you switch your party shortly before filing, there's
This is the
nothing that
previous
I've seen
testifier. This is not
that
who we
bars
wanted to
that
talk to. Thank you. Give me a second.
in state law.
Thank you, Representative Eichscheid. And Mr. Amodio, thank you for joining us by phone today. Thank you for your testimony and for answering questions. We will now go to our next testifier. Our next testifier is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. Mr. Dunmeyer is going to walk us through his memo on the legal basis for the division's removal of Daniel J. Sullivan from the primary ballot and answer any questions from members. Mr. Dunmeyer, would you please take yourself off mute, place yourself on the record, and begin your testimony?
Good afternoon. This is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. To the chair, the federal constitution has 3 qualifications that a person has to meet to be eligible to be a senator, and those are age. They must be 30 years old. They must have been a citizen of the United States for 9 years, and they must be an inhabitant of the state when elected. In the 1990s, the state of Arkansas attempted to put term limits on their congressional office holders by passing a constitutional amendment. And in the Supreme Court case, U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton, the Supreme Court found that that was unconstitutional because the framers of the Constitution intended the text that spells out those 3 requirements to be the exclusive list of constitutional qualifications. So to add a qualification that a person, for example, hasn't served 2 terms in the House would add to that exclusive list. So since the 1990s, that has been the case that controls questions like this, and any attempt to put qualifications on top of those 3 violates the Constitution. So, for example, to look into to try to determine what a person's motives are to run for office would not be appropriate under that case, because having a certain motive or not having a certain motive is not one of those 3 qualifications. And with that, I think that I'm available for questions if the committees have.
So his point is that you've got a constitutional provision for who can run for your U.S. Senate seats. There's 2 of them. And we've had constitutional amendments over the years that have changed how we select. It used to be the state Senate. State Senate used to select our senators, but that doesn't happen anymore. Now we do direct election by the populace. Point is, those who can run by the Constitution, and this is where I'm going to differ. I'm going to move in a different wave here than the status quo with the Republican circles. I think there ain't enough Republicans that are looking at the Constitution and saying, hey, this is how we should run our business here. We're looking at it as politically expedient. Look, this guy's a liar. We need to do the politically expedient thing that's going to give us the biggest chance and opportunity to win and expose him as fraud. And let's go to the Division of Elections and have them rule him as a ineligible candidate. Okay. Well, you can point to all of the state law that you want and the state regulations that you want, and the U.S. Constitution trumps all that. As we'll hear later, there are court cases that are specifically applicable to this. I think, my personal opinion, that show that the state's regulations are not going to hold up if this goes all the way to the Supreme Court. But here's the thing: as long as you're talking about Dan Sullivan between now and November, it's a win for the Sullivan team. Here, let's look one more thing. All right. Look here. Quickly, that's the Dan S. Sullivan website. This is the Dan Sullivan for Senate, Dan J. Sullivan website. Doesn't appear. This is off of his Facebook page. Okay, he's got a Facebook page. But if you click on his link for his website, it takes you back to here. It takes you here. Okay, so not a serious candidate. You're not getting much influence here. So as long as you're talking about Dan Sullivan and you can explain you're voting for Dan Sullivan, not Dan J. Sullivan, and that's the message that goes on between now and November, you can have really good confidence that people are going to understand the difference. And you're not talking about the challenger that's actually raising money. I think, just Ben's personal opinion here, I think that there are people with a knee-jerk reaction who are not looking at this from any sort of position of strength or anything like that. They're just having a knee-jerk reaction like, oh my gosh, there's going to be 2 Sullivans on the base. Oh my, what are we going to do? Oh, they're trying to, yeah, that's exactly right. Let's look at what people are going to hate me after this meeting. Let's look at what John Adams had to say. This is a quote that is attributed to him. It was a letter. It's not attributed. It's history. There's a letter that he wrote to the officers of the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division, Massachusetts Militia. And in it, he basically is saying, well, let me just, it's too good. While our country remains untainted with the principles and manners which are now producing desolation in so many other parts of the world, while she continues sincere and incapable of insidious and impious policy. Boy, I wish we could say that today. We shall have the strongest reason to rejoice in the local destination assigned us by Providence, by God's grace. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation, while it practices inequity and extravagance, and displays in the most captivating manner the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity, while it is rioting with rapine and insolence, this country will be the most miserable habitation in the world, because we have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is inadequate, wholly inadequate for the governance of any other. You can try to codify morality. You can try to regulate it. But if we, the people, are not willing, if we are willing to stand up and lie, to say, oh yeah, I want to be a senator. I want to be a senator. I'm doing this honestly. I'm not raising any money. I don't have a website that works. I haven't scheduled any public appearances. I don't have anybody that's supporting me. There's not really any campaign here. But I'm a legitimate senator. I want to be there. I'm trying really hard. That's a lie. It's a flat out lie. You are lying to people. You may be lying to yourself first, but you're lying to people. We don't have a constitution that can deal with that. Because you would have to cover every single opportunity that someone could come up with a lie and treat others with disrespect. It's disrespectful. You're not being upfront and honest. You can't legislate that. We'll get it right one time, and then a year, 2 years, 10 years down the road, somebody will test a new thread and you'll have to legislate something else. Like, it's a slippery slope if we don't have the character that brought us this nation in the first place. So I'm not in favor of the Division of Elections doing what they did, because that's it's like the easy wrong over the hard right. We don't survive if our people continue to look to government to solve our problems. That's exactly what the Republicans are doing. Look to our Division of Elections to solve this problem for us. Again, rescued by government. Not my I'm sure I'm pissing a whole lot of people off right now. Ben's short-sighted. He's naive. Maybe. Time will tell.
Thank you. I'll ask the first question and then go to Representative McCabe. We heard, Mr. Dunbar, we heard from Representative Costello. She referenced 6 AAC 260 about, sorry, 212. about and I'm just gonna I don't have it in front of me. So basically, that a candidate can't file in such a manner that it's misleading or confusing. Thank you for holding that up, Representative Sadler. I can't read that far. That they can't file in a misleading way to mislead voters. Does that allow? So my question is the division's remedy to take away the misleading aspect or to remove them from the ballot? Is it giving them the authority to remove people from the ballot if they believe that the way they filed is somehow misleading?
To the chair, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. The regulation that is codified at 6 AAC 25.212 subsection B says that a candidate's name may not appear on the ballot with a designation of any academic, professional, personal, or honorary degree or title held by a candidate, or in a manner that is confusing or misleading to voters or compromises the fairness or neutrality of the ballot. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme source of law in our country, and there's no administrative regulation that can override a constitutional requirement. So what this regulation tells the Division of Elections to do is to construct a ballot in a manner that is not confusing or misleading to voters. For example, by allowing them to discern between the two Daniel Sullivans, but this regulation does not allow them to violate the holding of the U.S. Supreme Court that there are only 3 qualifications for the office of U.S. Senator.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Chair Gray. So, Mr. Dunmeyer, I think what we're sort of talking past each other right here. You, in your letter, and we have been talking about what is required to hold an office in Alaska, the constitutional requirements for what is required to hold the office. You didn't really mention in your letter the AC, which is what is required to run for that office, to have your name on the ballot. So in other words, the Democrats, when they argued the Hafner case, said that, Hafner was qualified. The Republicans said he wasn't qualified to hold the office because he couldn't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but he wasn't qualified to hold it because he was obviously in prison, as the chair said, for a long time. So he wouldn't be qualified to hold the office, but he was still qualified to run for the office. In this case, we aren't trying to determine whether or not Mr. Daniel J. Sullivan is qualified to hold the office or not. That's what your letter sort of referenced. What we're trying to determine is whether or not he is qualified to run for the office, or if the mere fact that he is using the same pretty much everything as Senator Daniel S. Sullivan, including the same color website, virtually the same name. That, I think, is what Ms. Beecher relied upon, is the fact that it wasn't the constitutional requirements to hold the office. It was the AC that parses out how he can run for the office. Am I off base here?
Through the chair to Representative McCabe, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from
I have no idea whether Andrew Dunmeyer is a liberal or a conservative or a moderate. I don't know what his political affiliation is. Supposedly our lawyers are nonpartisan, but I mean, come on, everybody's got a political bent, and it is always going to seep out somehow. I can't tell here. I mean, you could easily point to the argument and say, well, because you're making this argument that you must be a liberal and you want the liberal to win, and that's why you're making this argument, right? But I'm a conservative. I want Dan S. Sullivan to win, but I'm making an argument that this is the way things are if we're going to have a populace that is willing to just lie about things. This is what you have to deal with. And is it necessarily a bad thing for Dan S. Sullivan to have a challenger that's got, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Just realize every dollar that's being spent for Dan Sullivan is for Dan Sullivan and not some other gal that's running for the seat, right? Let's help people understand which of the Dans is the one you really want to pick. That's the effort. Now you don't even have to defeat the other person. You just have to help people pick the right Dan. there's a confidence that comes. There's a confidence that comes with this. Maybe some reflection instead of a knee-jerk reaction that says, "Oh, we recognize this is happening, and now we're going to go after it, and we're going to use government to force this down." And maybe our leadership skills are just weak enough that we don't have confidence in our own position to use it to our advantage. There are Republican races that Republicans got elected because ranked choice voting was in place. I'd like to see ranked choice voting go away. But if it doesn't, then we got to get good at winning under that environment. And that requires us to not be so fixated on how things had been in the past, right? We got to recognize the operating environment, the battlefield in front of us, and attack it the way that we need to win. One size doesn't fit all. Like if things are going to happen in life that are going to make it more challenging, then we just rise to the occasion and we do better, we do bigger. You don't look to government to force the issue. It just is, it's can we be limited government in everything, or do we be limited government unless big government serves us? Then we'll be big government. You got a budget that's $1 trillion in debt every year, federal budget, because us Republicans are demanding more spending from our Republican people that we elect. Yeah, we want limited government, except when it's in our backyard, and then we want big government. Like, don't cut the government in my backyard. Here, give us $1 billion for healthcare. Our kids will pay it off. Alaska's healthcare is going to grow. We're going to do good because we've got federal money flowing in. Republicans, yeah, look at all that free money that's coming to us. I'm winning lots of friends tonight.
Legislative Legal Services. In the trial court in the Hafner case, the plaintiffs argued that Mr. Hafner was not qualified to be a U.S. Senator because there was no way that he would meet the inhabitancy requirement, which is not at the time that somebody files for election, but essentially on the election day. And the argument that the defendant asserted in that case was that there was a possibility, however remote, that he could be pardoned or otherwise get out of prison. And he had certified on his candidacy form that he met that requirement and therefore would become eligible or would be eligible on the election day if he were elected to serve that term.
Follow up. So I think what I just heard you say is that we, at first rub, when you first look at these, they appear to be opposite of each other. It appears like Ms. Beecher determined one way in one case and one way in another, but essentially these were two separate determinations because of the difference between filing to run and being on the ballot and actually holding the office, which you obviously couldn't do if you're in prison. And that's the difference in the determination. So essentially, these cases are completely different because of the difference between an advisory circular, between the AC 25-212 and the Constitution, right? I mean, is that right?
Through the chair to Representative McCabe, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal. A person who seeks to become a candidate in Alaska needs to file a declaration of candidacy with the Division of Elections. And AS 15-25030 tells the division what information is required. And in subsection A, there are 17 paragraphs of information that the person has to provide. That is what somebody has to do. That's the requirement that they have to fulfill to become a candidate for U.S. Senator. The division's role is to determine whether that candidate who submits that form meets the 3 qualifications that are found in the Constitution.
You think about it with regard to our laws and our regulations, what this attorney is saying. And I tend to think that there's some credibility here. There's some wisdom here. The statute and the law that the state of Alaska and the bureaucracy of Alaska put in place. Okay. That's the state law the legislature puts in place. And that's the AC, the Alaska code that the bureaucracy puts in place. Those measures that have been added over time, their function is to ensure that the 3 requirements in the U.S. Constitution are enabled. It's not to add to the 3 requirements in the Constitution. It would be unconstitutional to add a 4th one. That's what the attorney is saying. And the attorney's not saying it's his opinion. He's saying that that's the case that he's citing with regard to the Supreme Court's ruling that a 4th opinion of the state isn't constitutional. You can't add a 4th requirement. There's 3 requirements, and that's it. So ask your questions to make sure that those 3 requirements are being met. But outside of that, it's wide open because we want the U.S. Senate position. We want the person to be able to be elected to be as wide as possible. We want to cast a huge net to be able to catch as many potentials as possible. I mean, can the argument be made that as long as Daniel S. Sullivan continues to want to be a senator and continues to run for re-election, that nobody named Dan Sullivan can challenge him? That nobody named Dan Sullivan can become a candidate? Is that what we're saying? No, we're not saying that. We're just saying that Daniel J. Sullivan is not being honest. He's making a website that looks like Daniel S. Sullivan. He's only doing this under pretenses. Okay. This is the slippery slope, the morality piece. Because if people are willing to do that, you can't continue to add state law and regulations to fix that. That's the problem where we're at. So what you have to do, unless you want to live in a police state, in a state where you are heavily burdened by state law and regulation to address every little thing that people can do that is immoral, that is dishonest, or we start talking about morality and honesty in public service. We shun people and run them out of town when they're being dishonest. People of our own party? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. It's the hard road, but it's the right road. It's the only way that we survive as a nation, as a self-government, is for us to rise to that level of self-discipline and realize that we live in a country and we live under a self-government that allows things like this to happen for a reason, because we don't want to live in a police state. That just means we got to be better. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking there's not as big a downside as we think there is. Yes, people might be confused, but they'd be confused between the candidates anyway. This adds another level of confusion, but now you're solving a confusion problem between 2 Sullivans instead of a Sullivan and another contender, right? Like, that's the problem you want to have. Which of the Sullivans? Don't be talking about the other person. Make sure they don't matter. All you want the voter to go in is knowing which Sullivan to pick. Like, that's a gift. That's a gift. Unless you just suck and screw it up, that's a gift. I mean, the ads write themselves. Which Sullivan is the right Sullivan? which is the left Sullivan. Like, it's so it would be easy. A whole lot easier than getting caught up in the ideological battles and the and the name calling and the things that people aren't going to remember, and they'll get confused on between what she believes and what he believes, and they all sound like the same thing. No, don't worry about that. You just need to pick the right Sullivan. That's it. Just pick the right Sullivan. It has an S in it for senator. The other guy's a J for Joker. Like, that's what your ad is. You don't have to worry about the other person. All of the momentum is for the Sullivans, not for the other person.
Follow up. So that doesn't seem to fit under that AC 25212, where it gives the division greater powers to determine whether or not the candidate can actually be on the ballot in the form and manner in which they filed, such as Daniel J. Sullivan versus Daniel S. Sullivan. So you didn't mention that in what you just said just now. So I'm kind of getting more confused here.
Through the chair to Representative McCabe, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. 6 AAC 25212, subsection B, which is the regulation that we're talking about, in my opinion, doesn't give the division authority to kick somebody off the ballot at all. What that subsection does is tells them how to list people's name, and for example, not to add an academic or professional or honorary degree, and not to list their name in a manner that is confusing. But that doesn't mean that if two people have the same first and last name or similar names, that one of those two people should be removed from the ballot. That's not what that regulation gives the division authority to do.
Yeah, Kevin's helping with his point here. Says the difference is that Division Director Beecher was determining the procedure and not the qualification. The state cannot add something to the Constitution, such as a senator must be an Alaska Native or white, etc., to be a senator. The election or the ballot is the procedure, which Thornton v. allows, and that's where that got cut off. Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, the state can't add an additional requirement. But yes, the state also can't remove somebody from the ballot who's met the 3 requirements, because the 3 requirements are the 3 requirements. Once you've met those, you're qualified. You're qualified. The Constitution, if it was important to the framers of the Constitution, and it was important to what the Constitution says and the intent, they would have put it in that said, hey, states can legislate this, or states can regulate this so that it's not confusing, or people are not going to take advantage of this, right? That's what that would say. But it doesn't. It just says, here's the requirements. Once you meet these requirements, you get to run. And they're trusting the voters. Here's the thing, people. You know what all of this says? You know what all of this says is we don't trust the voters. We don't trust the voters. Voters are going to get confused. Well, they're partially right. Some of the voters are going to get confused. That's the problem that we live in when you're a self-government and people don't pay attention. They're going to get confused. They're going to go try to vote and they don't know. They shouldn't be there. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just filling in bubbles. Someone said I had to come vote. Maybe I get it right. Maybe I don't. It's self-government. If you want a king or you want somebody to be an aristocracy and make the decisions for you and be up on things, like understand what's happening, if that's what you want, you just want to not have to deal with all of that, then maybe that's the form of government we need to go to. If that's where the majority of the people are, they're like, hey, yeah, I just would rather somebody else do this and take care of me. We would need a different form, because this form doesn't really work that well. We'd need a different form. Let's just elect somebody to be king or governor for 10 years and let them run the show. Then we don't have to have these elections and these pesky things where people can try to game the system. I'm not arguing for gaming the system. Don't get me wrong. Like it is not something that should occur, but that's the system we live in. So we better be better at operating in it rather than just pointing the finger and trying to force the issue with government regulation. Like I don't believe that conservatives have a leg to stand on in this regard, because you're looking at the U.S. Constitution and what it is saying is the requirements for running for office. Period. Full stop. End of sentence. You can't add or take away from that. So get over it. Or maybe this is a strategy. This is how you keep people talking about Sullivan. I mean, if somebody's, in my camp and this is how you implement it, all right. I got you. If you didn't make a big deal of it, would we be talking about it? Anyway, let's see if there's anything good here.
I have many more, but thanks. I'll relent for now.
Thank you. I will follow up on Representative McCabe's question. So, Mr. Dunmeyer, can you just unpack for us again the Thornton case in Arkansas in terms of how the term limits couldn't be added? Because can you just unpack the case again for us and tell us exactly what the Thornton case tells us with reference to what's happening today in Alaska?
To the chair, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. In U.S. term limits versus Thornton, there was an amendment to the Arkansas State Constitution that prohibited the name of an otherwise eligible candidate for Congress from appearing on the ballot if that candidate had served 3 terms in the House of Representatives or 2 terms in the Senate. And what the Supreme Court held was that was an additional qualification on top of the 3 that are found in the text of the Constitution. So that basically the qualifications for office from that state, if that amendment went into effect, would have been that the person is old enough, that they've been a citizen for long enough, that they inhabit the state, and that they have not served 2 or 3 terms, depending on which body. And the Supreme Court looked to the text of the Constitution and found that that is the ultimate arbiter of what the qualifications are. And those 3 qualifications in the Constitution are the exclusive list of qualifications that states may impose for Senate or for the House of Representatives.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on that. So Representative McCabe had mentioned the Hafner case and said, I just wanted to correct that it was actually Democrats that challenged his appearance. Democrats didn't want him to be there because they thought that somebody who lived in another state and had never been here and was serving a 200-month prison sentence and couldn't get out would not be able. And I know for some people it's completely irrelevant, but I'm just going to bring that up, that there's some question from Representative McCabe about there might be a difference between being able to serve and being on the ballot. So in this case, yeah, Mr. Hafner was unable to serve because he was in prison, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be on the ballot.
Yeah, so this is my point, Kevin, and we may have to just agree to disagree on this. It's not the requirement for running for office, it's a requirement for holding the office. And I agree with that distinction that you're trying to make here. The Constitution says, here are the 3 requirements for holding the office. Okay. If you're not eligible to hold the office, then you can't hold the office. You can't run for the office. Okay. But now we're going to say, well, you have to be qualified also to run for the office. So not only do you have to hold the office, but you have to qualify to run for the office. But the Constitution doesn't say anything about being qualified for running for the office. So if the state or some sub jurisdiction below the U.S. Constitution adds in a requirement for running for office, that a candidate could then be disqualified. They'd be fully qualified under the 3 listed under the Constitution, but now they're disqualified for being able to run for office. They met everything for holding the office, but they can't run for the office. Well, then what was the point of having the 3 things in the Constitution for holding the office? You actually have to have those three things plus what one of the other 50 states has to say about it. Okay. But that's not what it says. That's not what the intent of the Constitution is. It says here, three things. You meet these three things, you can hold the office, which means you can run for the office. If it's not, if it doesn't mean that, then it means any of the 50 states could put some other qualification down there that says whatever they want. Yeah, you can hold the office, but first you got to meet our requirements for running for office. I don't think that holds water. I don't think that is what actually is going to carry the day. That's kind of the point. The state adds lots of conditions to run, an application, a fee, etc. Yeah, but that's in furthering the three, right? Furthering the three. Not putting in some other litmus test that, well, yeah. I see your point. What if they don't pay the fee? Are they not qualified to run? That's what you're saying? Fee should be there for the paperwork. If you put a $4,000 fee in and that discourages somebody from running, I think they would have a case if they went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, you know what? The Constitution doesn't say anything about me having to come up with a $4,000 fine or fee to be able to run. Of course, if you're going to be a serious candidate, $4,000 is nothing, right? So there's that. But I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to see an application and a fee, like an administrative fee, as a thing to stand in the way of somebody being able to file and be qualified under those three. Here, we're saying somebody of the same name who's incompetent and can't get a website up, or maybe it had a website up and that it was meant to be deceptive. You're qualified in every other way, but you're a liar, so we're not going to let you run. Constitution doesn't say anything about liars not being able to run. This is exactly my point. This is exactly my point. If we are comfortable as conservatives with drawing the line, then we're always going to be having that question. Where's the line? Where's the line? It's going to be here. It's going to be where we're comfortable with now. And then some other bad behavior is going to come up, and then we're going to move that line. Next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, our kids will be dealing with it, and then we're going to move that line again. This is the argument that I'm trying to say, is that this is what John Adams was saying. We don't have a form of government that is adequate to deal with this. You're going to end up being less free. You're not going to have freedom because you will have legislated or administratively controlled through regulation every little nuanced thing because people are behaving poorly. And it all boils down to this internal compass, this morality that says, it is wrong for me to lie. One of the things. That we've got a candidate here that's a liar. He's not a serious candidate. He's going to meet his maker someday, and he'll have to explain that, right? But this is exactly the point. Where is the line? We look at it and we say, okay, I can see the line. I'm going to draw the line here. And then next year we got to redraw the line. What's the alternative? What's the solution? Don't admire the problem, right? What's the solution? The solution is getting better at communicating your message and winning, even though the liar is in the race. Maybe you fail. You know why I know this is true? Because I know that I'm never voting for a sales tax alone. But that's what my opponent in the last race said that's what I was going to do. When I sit down and I have a conversation with somebody for 5, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, they get me. They understand what my point is. But I don't have 5, 10, 15 minutes with every person. So I lose the election because I can't communicate my message. That's what it boils down to. There aren't enough people that are paying attention to state politics. Yes. What is it? Philanthropist for Frank here. That word, Frank. You're catching me. You're like, I've got a tick mark. Frank says, this is a direct quote from Ben. Voters are not informed. This is the second time I have heard it from Ben. Yeah, I'll stand by it. Quote me. Put it on my headstone. It's 100% accurate. Not all voters, some voters, and enough voters are not informed. Informed is not stupid. Informed is just you haven't spent the time to understand the issue. You don't want to elect Ben because he's in favor of taxes. Furthest thing from the truth. Here I am trying to solve a sticky wicket. I'm putting forward a series of bills to communicate a fiscal plan. And the only thing everybody, including my own party, wants to focus on is Ben put forward a sales tax. Okay, so a fiscal plan from the fiscal policy working group that I was part of, that I believe in, I should do everything except the thing that we don't like. Where's the commitment? Like, do I believe the fiscal policy working group recommendations or not? Like, the political problem has to be solved with some give and take. So you're going to have to cut government over here to make these people happy, and you have to raise revenue over here to make these people happy. That's how you get a better system put in place, okay? That's what I believe. That's why I support the fiscal policy working group recommendations. That's why I took it and put it into my own fiscal. But how do you communicate to people who are not paying attention? Yes, they're uninformed. 100% uninformed. And they still go vote. So this is what I'm saying. Dan S. Sullivan has a great opportunity to just communicate which Sullivan to pick. You don't even have to know what I stand on the policies. Just know that I'm not the other guy that's the liar, who's not campaigning, who's not serious. I'm not that guy. You go vote for Dan S. And that's your message. You don't even have to talk about the other candidate. Now, that can't be your entire campaign message, don't get me wrong. But it does help you tremendously. It's an easy thing to talk about. I'm the S for senator. The other guy's the J for joker. Or D for deception, or decoy. Decoy Dan. I'm the Senator Dan, he's the decoy. Whatever. It's easy to do. It's easy to talk about. Anyway. I'm looking at your comments here because it's moving quickly. Yeah, but people don't know, right? Chris says, we're paying the highest hidden taxes in the nation, including children. Yeah, children are paying taxes in Alaska. The statute says you're entitled to you are personally entitled to some of the royalties, to some of the earnings off of the royalties of your resource wealth as resource owner. Your statute says you're entitled to it, but we're going to tax that. We're going to take it away from you in lieu of doing something else, either reducing spending or taxing somebody else. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. And Republicans continue to do it because it's a whole lot more comfortable to do that than it is to go say somebody, yeah, we need a sales tax. Or we need to cut this spending over here. It's the easy button. The guy who stands up and says, hey, there is a solution. You're not going to like every part of it, but there is a solution. And people are like, yeah, we don't want to hear that, Joker. We just want to live our uninformed life. As long as you keep us happy, we'll be fine. This is not everyone, but there's enough people out there who are thinking this way. It's like, it's human nature. It's human nature. I don't want to do what's hard. I want to find the shortcuts. I want to find the easiest path forward. I'm not criticizing. It is human nature. We all do it. But with self-government, too much of that leads us astray.
Can you verify that that is the case, that we can have lots of people on our ballots even if they can never serve?
To the chair, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. That was the fact pattern in the Hafner case, that Mr. Hafner was in prison and almost certainly would continue to be in prison when his congressional term started. I am not aware of any other cases in which somebody filed that was unable to serve for that reason.
And so I guess just to follow up, and then I'll go back to Representative McCabe. It seems like we have a much broader way of appearing on a ballot. And so in other words, the bar for removing someone from a ballot would be extraordinarily high, because you just have to meet these very basic requirements. Now, serving in office is something different. Am I getting that wrong?
To the chair, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. The bar to appearing on the ballot is submitting a declaration of candidacy under 1525-030A and providing all the information that's required there to the division. And then if the person is qualified, the ultimate determiner of whether they get to serve or not is the voters.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thanks, Mr. Dunmeyer. So correct me if I'm wrong on this one as well. Thornton doesn't eliminate all the state rules, right? I mean, we can still enforce reasonable procedural requirements such as filing deadlines, signatures, fees, basic affirmations, and all that. And those are over and above what would seem, I mean, if you don't meet those procedural requirements, then you can't be on the ballot. You keep going back to this constitutional requirement of what it takes to be a U.S. Senator. That really has nothing to do with this argument. Right now, Director Beecher is saying he just can't be on the ballot. She is not making a judgment on whether or not Daniel J. Sullivan from Petersburg is qualified to be a senator. She's making a judgment on whether or not, in her opinion, based on the AC 25-212, is he qualified to be on the ballot. Thornton didn't eliminate the state's ability to do that, did it?
Through the chair to Representative McCabe, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. You are correct, Representative McCabe, that in Thornton, the court held that the Elections Clause gives states authority to enact numerous requires as to procedures and safeguards which are necessary to enforce the fundamental rights involved. So some examples of procedures and safeguards that have been upheld were a $3,000 filing fee for candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives. What has not been upheld is a requirement that the candidate be a registered voter, because that was determined to be a substantive requirement above the three that are found in the Constitution. And there was one case where a Nevada resident tried to file as a candidate to a special election to fill the vacant seat of Congressman Sonny Bono, and which was from California. And there was a state statute that said that candidates must reside in the state at the time of nomination. That, for example, was not found to be a procedure and safeguard. That was a substantive regulation that was struck down because it wasn't one of the three qualifications as found in the text of the Constitution.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember the Bono case.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Representative Holland, but before that, in your memo, Mr. Dunmeyer, there's a lot of reference to previous cases. And in those cases, the division says quite clearly multiple times that it's not their job to investigate they're not an investigative body, that they really can check publicly available data to verify basic facts, but they don't do deep dive investigations. Can you speak a little bit about who would do deep dive investigations and who would figure out, for example, what the motives of candidates are and why they're running?
To the chair, and for the record, this is Andrew Dunmeyer from Legislative Legal Services. It is not the division's role. They have no explicit authority in situations like this to look into a candidate's motivations. There may be fact patterns where an elections-related crime under AS 1556 implicates somebody's mental state. There, of course, could be APOC investigations where the candidate's actions are looked into, but for the qualifications to run for U.S. Senator, it's not the division's role to look into the motivations of a candidate.
Thank you. Representative Holland.
Great, thank you, Chair Gray, to Mr. Dunmeyer.
Okay, so we've kind of beat this dead horse here. So the candidate from Petersburg, the Dan J. Sullivan, has appealed through the administrative procedures, and his case, this issue is going to go to a administrative judge, and they're going to make a determination. Now, I would imagine if this determination falls against the candidate, then it gets appealed. Maybe if it goes against the state, it gets appealed too. I don't know, but it's not over yet. I guess the takeaway here is that there is an ongoing appeal, my understanding, and we will continue talking about the two Dans as we go towards the primary election, and who knows how long we're going to talk about it. It's just my contention that this is not necessarily a bad thing, and we get a great opportunity to talk about Sullivan's and not have to talk about somebody else, and that is a gift. It's a gift. Now you just have to communicate to people which is the right Dan. Okay, let's talk about pipelines for a minute. Somebody said here, asked me a question right up at the beginning, and I should have marked it, but I didn't. Frank, I knew it was going to be you, Frank. You're always asking good questions. What happens if the federal government takes over the AKLNG project, the pipeline project, or pipeline and export facility project, right? What happens if they take it over? I don't even exactly know how the mechanics of it would happen, but here's what I know. Here's what I suspect or think that I know. The president has extraordinary powers when he labels something as national security. And the Department of Energy has many dollars to their disposal that could possibly be brought to bear. Now, it's not going to be able to pay for the entire project, $50-60 billion. They don't have that much money. But for example, they might have money to be able to buy gas and bank it. You owe us gas over the next 10 years at a certain price. We purchase it upfront in advance. And because that purchase is made, the financiers see that a portion of the gas is purchased. I don't know. I'm imagining things right now, right? I am guessing because I don't know how it would work. But the president making something national security means that the federal government takes jurisdiction over it. That is the theory. Okay. I don't have an example to point to, but that's in my understanding what it would be possible with regard to national security is the governor, the president or the designee says this project is now a project of national security, and the federal government becomes the jurisdiction that manages it. So it means that just like the RCA came to the legislature and said, we are not working towards managing or regulating the pipeline because FERC is the regulatory agency. The federal government's regulatory agency is the one that has jurisdiction over this pipeline. We do not have jurisdiction, so we can't touch it. We don't issue regulations. We don't even think about it. Okay. So if the federal government steps in under a blanket of national security and says, we now have jurisdiction over this project, it means that the legislature cannot make laws that impact or affect it. The federal government, and I'm not sure whether that's a bureaucratic thing or whether it's something that has to be done through Congress, would then become the decision maker for it. If it's under national security and it's an emergency, it's probably executive branch that's making the determinations, subject to any authority or limits to their authority given or required by the legislature. I don't know. I'm spitballing here, but that's in essence what it would mean is our jurisdiction as a state to tax it, to regulate it, would go away. We wouldn't have that jurisdiction anymore. It's now a federal project. It's under a blanket of national security, and we've lost our opportunity to regulate or tax. So the decision maker that AGDC and Glenfarne works with now, they don't go to Juneau. They go to Washington, D.C. or wherever the headquarters is for whoever the head jurisdiction is. Probably Department of Energy would be my guess, but I don't know. That commissioner becomes the guy that does the negotiations or his designee. So now Glenfarne has a conversation with them with regard to what is the tax rate going to be, and the federal government sets a tax rate at whatever it is going to be. They could do the same thing, set up a volumetric tax. It's going to be this. We're moving forward with the project. There you go. State is out of it. Now, is the state going to sue? Is there going to be a states' rights issue? Maybe, but it's got a national security umbrella. I think that's pretty tight. It's probably something that is very hard to poke a hole in. Maybe the federal government throws us some bones. I don't know. I don't know all of the nuances here. All I'm saying is that if President Trump and the messages that I'm hearing is that the pipeline is going to get built one way or the other, that's what that has to mean. It has to mean that in some form or fashion, that if the state screws it up and in the conditions that the state is able to produce means that the pipeline's not economically feasible under those conditions, but the federal government sees a way that they can change those conditions and it be economically feasible, well, then that would be what would be necessary. Don't know whether it's good for Alaskans or not. I don't know. If I've got gas flowing and it's low cost, like it's $8 or less, I'm happy. I'm happy. Keep it flowing for generations, and I'm happy. I could care less whether we get any tax revenue off of it. To be honest with you, more tax revenue means more government in the state of Alaska. I'm okay. I'm okay. Just give us low-cost gas. Checking your comments. See, I tried to talk about something other than gas, than pipelines and gas and money. We're able to do it, but y'all want to talk about this. Gas pipelines. It's okay. You did a good job tonight. Yeah, great. Trump would be an amazing pipeline construction manager. I'm not sure if manager is the right word, but promoter, yes. Biggest, most beautiful pipeline ever. Yeah. Miguel, I don't know whether the last time that there was a national defense or a national security argument being made was World War II. I don't know. I would bet that there are other instances since then, but they are probably well, they would have to be smaller in scope. If this, 50, $60 billion project is one of the largest in our nation's history with regard to size and scope, then there wasn't anything that was similar to this. But I would bet that there are smaller projects that have gotten a national security designation, and we just don't know about them. Yeah. And by saying the feds will oversee the project and make sure it's completed, it's identifying that the feds are the ones that have the jurisdiction to do that. Right now, the state does, and the feds don't really have a say except for wherever the alignment of FERC is. We're the ones that are determining the law. Well, that wouldn't be the case if the federal government takes over. We would not have any jurisdiction over it. Yeah, Frank, this is the crux of the problem, right? We would have, it's a states' rights issue. Like, this is Alaskan land. This is Alaskans' self-determination, and here's the federal government stepping in and saying, no, we know better. I get it. There's one part of me that's saying, hey, that would be the wrong way to go. If our own people are going to run us into the ground, then I guess I'm raising a flag and saying, hey, we need some help. The same people that are scuttling this project would rely on federal dollars to give us windmills and solar panels, and they would think they're doing the right thing. If we don't have enough voters in the state of Alaska that can see the error in that way, we do need some help. Or we're going to go find a new residence somewhere outside. Because that is not going to work for us. I think you're asking what money pays for the pipeline if the feds take over. I don't think the feds taking over is we now own the project. It's just they're the jurisdiction to manage it. It would still be private funded project. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be able to. I mean, if it can be a private funded project with the state of Alaska as jurisdiction, why wouldn't it with the federal government as jurisdiction? Now, I suppose the federal government, being what it is, could say, well, you're going to use our federal loan guarantees. That might be a problem for other investors and for Glenfarne for a couple of reasons. Glenfarne would much rather not have the strings attached to the federal dollars. So that's why they've been saying they're going to go to the private monies. So unless someone points out that it isn't possible for a federal project or a federal jurisdiction over the project and private money, unless someone says that's not possible, I would expect that would continue. Yes, Glenfarne will still pay for the project. In the announcement that was made with respect to the executive orders by Trump, which is freeing up some additional monies within DOE, Department of Energy, what I saw was in the realm of hundreds of millions of dollars. That doesn't get us much pipe. We need billions of dollars. So I don't. Okay, I have limited information here, but from my understanding, that's where we're at. So I would expect that Glenfarne would still be on the hook for finding the investors and paying for the project. Yeah, Chris, this is Cook Inlet's having a big issue because Alaskans don't want to pay the price that would be necessary to find the gas. That's the truth. There are people who can go out and find gas if we would be willing to pay what it takes to go find the gas. There's plenty of gas there. We just don't want to pay for it. Why would Trump throw us a bone with all the politics stopping the projects? I don't know why he would. If we're defining bone as in some sort of tax revenue, other than he knows that, you know, if you're getting some money, then you're at least some happy, and you're not as inclined to sue and cause problems. So it's the right thing to do is to make sure the state is benefiting from this. They just can't get out of their own way and solve the problem themselves. I don't know. Why else would he throw it? Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's like, screw Alaskans. They can't see fit to send the right people to the legislature. They don't deserve any of these funds. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, does anybody really know what Trump is going to do? I mean, that's the wild card with having him in the office, right? We don't really know. There's plenty to talk about, isn't there, Kevin? Somebody's got to have an opinion about bycatch or resident hunters, roads. Yeah. I'm looking at what happened with a fire down here last weekend, and I'm thinking to myself, we need a bunch of cat trails. And by cat, I'm saying like dozer trails. I know that there were dozer trails pushed through the area that I live in the, I would say, early to mid 70s. Maybe it was the late 70s. I'm not sure. Anyway, in the 70s, there were a bunch of dozer trails put in. I know that because as a kid in the 80s and early 90s, I was driving around on three-wheelers, right? They made great ways to get around. They've since grown in. they've filled back in for the most part. We have got a tremendous amount of firewood and fuel for forest fires out in the Moose Range that needs to come down. And it's either going to come down with a giant forest fire one day that risks burning up Swanson River oil field and other communities along the periphery. Or you let people go in and you start taking the firewood out and having it be beneficial for something. Like, it is completely short-sighted to say we can't have those cat trails that enable that type of thing to happen because what? A decade later, the cat trails are gone, or 2 decades later, they're gone. You can't even tell they were there. Just ridiculous that we're doing this to ourselves. We'd rather spend the money, state and federal dollars, to fight the fires than allow people to go make some use of this commodity. It's crazy. We could talk about that, Kevin. Frank, you don't have an interior decorator. Who are you kidding? How many F-22s could the pipeline buy? Yeah. They're like $1 billion a pop. Something like that. Or am I way off? I know that our big bombers are $1 billion. I don't know what the F-22 is. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot. Let's just say a lot. Yeah, that would be an interesting impact to the state of Alaska, wouldn't it? If we could get the Jones Act waived, that would, maybe it's only for the project, but that would change a lot for Alaskans if we didn't have to fight with that anymore. The Dean, going off the deep end. The Civil War was a states' rights issue. Southern states said they wanted to do business with slaves. And the federal government stepped in and said, "You're not allowed." You're not wrong. It was major financial. That is true. So you guys are going to have a battle over tax caps there in the interior? Vote to keep it? Sounds like the right thing to do. Is this, Chris, is this for North Slope oil production, or do you think this is something to do with the gas pipeline? I've heard rumors there's products, supplies, and equipment being purchased already. I can't confirm it, but that's my understanding from people that I think are in the know. I mean, you got to think about it. If they want to start construction within a year, there's some equipment and some supplies that have got a year plus on lead time, and you got to start moving on that. I don't know. Makes sense to me. Yeah, this is, see, Frank, you're making my point for me with regard to the uninformed voter, right? The uninformed Alaskans. Hex is and was asking for a tax break. They were asking for royalty reduction, okay? Hex would be just as happy. They could achieve the same result if the price that they were allowed to charge for their commodity was higher. You wouldn't need the tax break. You would need the royalty relief. So it's either or. It's a, which input do you want to adjust? You want to adjust the state's tax or their royalty piece? And think of royalties as what is coming to us as owners, right? We get a royalty. If you're in Texas and somebody comes and puts an oil well on your farmland, you get a royalty for that money coming out of your land. It's not a tax because you're not a state. You don't have taxing authority. You have a royalty. Okay. So royalty reduction is Alaskans saying we're going to take less from you in our owner state because we want the commodity that you want, that you're going after. Having gas is more important to us than having the royalty or the size of royalty. Well, we could say, hey, we'll keep the royalty. We'll leave the royalty exactly where it is. We don't want to adjust that. We don't want to go down that road. We don't want to set the precedent. We're going to keep the royalty, but we are going to agree to up the price by whatever you need or a reasonable price. And we'll start paying more for gas. Okay. Either of those two things means that the producer has more money in their pocket. They have a path to go get the gas. Either of those two things are necessary for Hex to be able to go do what they're going to do. Otherwise, they don't see a profit. There's no profit there for them to do it. So they're not going to do it. So the voter that says, oh, look at that company just needs a tax. They just need a tax cut or they need a tax break to go out and get the gas. Why can't they just go get the gas? Because you're not willing to pay what it would cost for them to go get the gas. If you were willing to pay, then they wouldn't need the tax break. And voters largely don't understand that. Uninformed. Thank you for that opportunity, Frank. Miguel says the Interior also got on the ballot this upcoming election to move the voting day to all in November. The Interior Borough, let's do this and get it almost. That's exactly right. So the Mat-Su did that 2 elections ago. I was part of a team down here that went out and got the signatures and did the same thing here on the Kenai, and we moved our election, our borough elections to November as well. So it would be good, I think, if the Interior could align with the other population centers down here. And it'd do a lot of good if the voters in Anchorage would move their elections from April to November as well. That would be really good. Yeah, timber management. Right now we've got not forest management, or what is it? It's a moose range, National Wildlife Refuge. We're managing for the animal commodity, not the timber, the trees, right? Timber management. Yes, some of us still have to cut firewood. Here's the thing, is the beginning of my neighborhood has natural gas, but the natural gas pipeline does not extend to the back of the neighborhood where I live. I'm okay with that. You know why I'm okay with that? I bet you know. Neighbors. If I had gas running down my street, I'd have a whole lot more neighbors. And I'm okay with not having the neighbors. Yes, sir. Frank, are you kidding me? You do have an interior decorator? Good on you, man. I'm not sure you and I can be friends, but good on you. I'm kidding. I have an interior decorator, interior designer in the family. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, Craig, that's a really good point. If the federal government takes over, it's likely the Davis-Bacon wages, which would increase the cost of the project. I don't know how much, by how much. I can't imagine that the prevailing wage that would be paid is going to be a whole lot less than Davis-Bacon, but probably is. Move the voting date. Will there be more uninformed voters voting? Hopefully there will be more informed voters voting, at least on presidential election years. Although this statistic caught me and just almost made my blood boil when I heard this presentation. Said that there were, and I might get this number wrong, there were 16,000 voters for Trump, ballots that voted for Trump that did not vote for ranked choice voting, like didn't fill in a bubble in that ballot measure. Think about that. People who wanted to see Trump in office, but didn't care to offer an opinion on whether they wanted to see ranked choice voting sustained or not. I think it's an argument for uninformed. Like, why would you do that? Why would you go and vote and only vote the presidential ballot and not vote for the other, the thing that's influencing our elections more than anything else? One way or the other. I don't get it. That is somebody that I do not understand. No, we're going to save deferred maintenance for morning talks with Michael Dukes. $120 an hour for remote work. Is that Davis-Bacon wages or is that prevailing wages here, outside government service? I don't know. I'm not a welder. That's pretty good money, though. I mean, you're trading your time for money, but if you got to trade it, more is better. And crazy if that's straight time, overtime you'd be killing it. Because I'm imagining it's not just straight time. You're going to be working 12-hour days to get this pipeline done. I would just bet. That's pretty good. That's pretty good money as a welder if that's just straight time, which is usually what it is. Anyway. All right. Well, so we've got a conference committee report that we need to, or a conference committee report that we need to hear from. Hopefully it happens here soon. And now we're going to have an appeal for the Dan Sullivan's issue. Dan Sullivan's, or is it Dan Sullivan? Dan Sullivan's. That's what's going on. Hey, if there's local issues that you want to see chatted about or broadcast here, hit me up on email. There's a school board meeting coming up, or assembly meeting, or city council, or something like that. You want to see broadcast. I'm considering what I should do here after this session ends and we have fewer things to talk about in the legislature. So if I can highlight local issues and you want to jump on here with me and help me highlight them, then we should consider it, because I think it would be valuable for you and your communities, and I'm willing to do it. So send me an email. Here it is, producer@oversightlive.com, and we'll see what we can make work that way. All right, we're going to call the show tonight. Have a good night. We will see you tomorrow, Tuesday night, and we'll catch up with what's happened. All right, have a good night. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for participating. Hey, click that like and share on the way out. That way others can see that we're actually participating here and there's something of value. We'll see you later.